Antes de començar, de que comenci en David, anem a veure una presentació que ens faran na Magdalena i en Miquel sobre aquestes iniciatives que ha iniciat el govern a diferents escoles de Mallorca del projecte de la Terra en el currículum.
El projecte de la Terra al currículum. Aquest és un projecte que va néixer gràcies a l'esforç que durant 4 anys consecutius el grup de persones que formen l'associació a poc i el Servei de Formació Contínua de la Direcció General d'Ordenació, Innovació i Formació Professional han dedicat a l'organització de les jornades d'educació per la vida i altres activitats afins com són el curs i el seminari sobre les faules d'en Gunther Pauli i els cicles de conferències L'educació, instrument de transformació, que han constituït un itinerari formatiu basat en una visió sistèmica i holística de l'educació. La participació en aquestes activitats durant aquests cursos ha estat massiva i de cada vegada són més els docents que, partint des del món natural, apliquen nous sistemes educatius basats en la pedagogia sistèmica i holística i que, per això, han fet del vincle i relació amb la naturalesa l'eix principal de la seva pràctica docent. Responent a aquestes necessitats, el passat curs 2013-2014, el Servei de Formació Contínua va promoure el projecte de la Terra al currículum per facilitar als centres que s'hi adherissin la possibilitat de poder treballar dins un marc normatiu d'una forma més lligada a la naturalesa i desenvolupar un projecte de currículum integrat de centre basat en els principis de l'ecologia i en la participació de la comunitat escolar. Les escoles que hi formen part són CEIP Rodamilans de Sineu, CEIP Son Anglada, Escoleta d'Esporles, EI Ses Païsses d'Eivissa, CEIP Sant Carles d'Eivissa i CEIP Sant Miquel de Son Carrió. La dinàmica de treball ha consistit en l'elaboració d'un projecte de currículum integrat de centre que parteixi del treball pràctic a l'hort escolar i la cuina ecològica. Un aprenentatge pràctic basat en projectes sobre el món natural i els principis de l'ecologia, emprant un enfocament multidisciplinari, constructivista, holístic i sistèmic. Durant el curs anterior i també aquest, realitzam trobades en tots els centres implicats en el marc d'un seminari d'àmbit autonòmic i en la mateixa denominació del projecte, Seminari de la Terra al currículum. En aquestes sessions, els centres implicats intercanviem experiències, reflexionam sobre la pràctica, aclarim dubtes, realitzam dinàmiques educatives per facilitar l'elaboració i l'aplicació de projectes, aprofundim en les metodologies, sobretot holístiques i sistèmiques, i feim el seguiment i avaluació del procés. A través d'aquest seminari, a més, reforçam la comunicació i l'intercanvi de material gràcies a l'utilització de l'entorn d'aprenentatge Moodle. Durant el present curs ens dedicarem a aplicar el projecte i enriquir els nostres coneixements mitjançant activitats de formació a centres, en la modalitat de seminaris, els centres i tallers sol·licitades i aprovades pels centres de professorat respectius de cada demarcació. Gràcies.
David Tora.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yesterday, I said something about the Keeling curve. Do all of you remember that? Did you all look it up last night? How many of you know what the Keeling curve is now? All right, you pass, you pass, you pass, you pass. The rest of you flunk. You got to come back for remedial work. I want to talk about hope and despair. And if you're optimistic, you don't know enough. If you're in despair, that's a sin. Don't want to do that. And the middle ground between optimism and despair is hope. And so for the last 2 days, we've been doing a lot of things. I've never seen a staff moon a bunch of photographers. But that happened yesterday. You don't find that funny? I didn't have my camera, but I wish I had. But we've been talking about hope and love. And so I want to ask a question. How then do we act? What do we do? What's it mean to not just have hope or love in your heart and a sense of hopefulness about the world, but then how do you act? What do you do? And for all of you who are teachers, how do you teach the way to act in the world? So that is my talk this morning. This is the front cover of New Yorker magazine, and it's a depiction of an old Islamic tale called the Tale of the Jinn, Jinn. And in this old tale, humankind, you and me, are on trial. And in the jury box are all the animals. And so they've been given voice and sentience. They can think and they can speak. And so there are alligators and birds and walruses and buffalo and so forth. And they're in the jury box, and they have voice and they can think. And the case against us is a very powerful case. We're the species that I said yesterday, we've wiped out since 1970 about half of the animals on the earth. We've placed in jeopardy about half of the species on Earth because of climate change. And climate change, we're changing the climate of the Earth very rapidly so that by the middle of this century, Earth will be probably 2 degrees centigrade warming unless we act very quickly. And by the end of the century, it could be 4 or 6 degrees centigrade warmer. And somewhere along that line, things come undone. Civilization doesn't survive that transition to a much hotter world. That's a world of big storms and rising sea levels and changing ecologies and diminished species and much more human conflict and collapsing economies. It's a world of hunger and desperation. It's a world we can't hold together. That's a world that's coming undone. So we're in the dock. We're being tried. And I sometimes ask my students to be the lawyer for humankind. What case can you make for our survival that would convince the animals on Earth that we should survive? And Americans were shaped a lot by Puritans and Presbyterians. And their first view is that humans, there's no case to be made for human survival. We're evil and we got to go. And so somebody once defined a Presbyterian as the kind of person that stays awake at night worrying that somebody somewhere is having a good time, like Patch Adams. And then they think about it a little more. And what comes across when they think about it a little more is, we are the species that Mozart and Cervantes and Shakespeare, and maybe we're worth keeping around for a while longer. But my point is this: if we knew better why we deserve to survive that trial, the animals just say, okay, we'll put you on a contingent sentence. You're on parole, but you can stay. Then we would know better how to go about it. We would know better how to act on love than we do now. Does that make sense? If we knew why we deserve to survive, we would know better how to go about the act of survival. So I want to ask how do we do? How do we act? So what do we do? How do we change the odds that we've stacked against us? And most important, what do you do with children? And a lot of good examples. What do they need to know? What kind of skills do you prepare them for? What kind of world are they going to live in? We do know it's going to be a very different world than you and I grew up in. That's already happened. We're already playing this out. And so the effects, and I talked a bit about this yesterday, I don't want to get back into it now unless you want to in questions and answers. But what comes out of our tailpipes and smokestacks, what we burn, changes the climate. But there's a 30-year lag between the emission of carbon dioxide from smokestacks and our tailpipes and the climate change-driven weather effects that we see. And so we're not seeing the effects of the current carbon level in the atmosphere is a bit over 400 parts per million. Never been that high before since we've been on the planet. For our whole existence as a species, it's been around 280 parts per million. Now we're over 400. Never been here before. This is brand new. But we don't know what 400 parts per million or 420 or 450 as carbon goes up will do to us. What we're now seeing are the effects of about 365 parts per million. So there's this lag between what we do and the consequences that we suffer. Now, this is just a depiction of where we are on the planet. If you took all life on Earth and measured it roughly relative to the size of the planet Earth, it would be a thin film of cellophane, say, wrapped around a soccer ball. That's all there is. And it changes dramatically. That's the biosphere. It goes up a few miles and down a few miles, but that is roughly the thickness of cellophane around a soccer ball. And population here, in the year 1800, there were 1 billion of us on Earth. By the end of this century, the world that your students and my students will live in will be 10 billion or more. So there's just a lot more of us. There's more stuff on the planet. There are more things moving faster, higher expectations. We're at the end of an era, I didn't say here of fossil fuels, I just said cheap fossil fuels. And so that era is come and gone. We burned the easy stuff, and now we're getting at the harder stuff. And so in the United States and in much of Europe and the United Kingdom, we're fracking. We're going down into the earth and forcing out, because with the use of a lot of chemicals, we're now forcing out fossil fuels and so forth, and this is very controversial. It's very destructive because it puts our energy appetite against our need for water, and water is always going to be more basic. And then we're at about 402 parts per million, guarantees this, and the number of species in jeopardy is really quite high. So your students will live in something like a biological holocaust, what is being called the great, or the sixth great extinction spasm. So what do? I'm going to talk about design. So love in action has certain principles and rules, and that's what I want to talk about. And this is a hard discipline, but there's hope here, because love and so forth without the skill to act competently on that love is useless. It may make it feel better, but it doesn't solve what really is causing us jeopardy. So on the screen behind me, when we make things, we've been making things by form. And so this is Newsweek magazine. This is a building by Frank Gehry, the same architect that did the Guggenheim in Bilbao. And then there's placemaking. And my friend Wendell Berry describes placemaking as, the first rule of placemaking is right down here. You don't mess up your place or someone else's place to make yours better. So you don't extract materials and so forth from some other place that ruins their place to make yours nicer and more convenient and so forth. So he asks 3 questions. First question is, what's here? And what's here is important. It's the climate, it's bedrock geology, it's the biology, it's the social culture, it's the history of a place. So what's here? You design in a context. And then the second question is, what will nature let you get away with or permit you to do in a particular place? What are the bounds of tolerance in any particular place? What's the margin for error in a place? And then the third question is the most interesting. What will nature help you do in a particular place? This was interesting this morning. Satish and I went out this morning at Guillaume's home, and we went down through a series of terraces, beautiful stone terraces, and all around us were gardens. It looked kind of like a wild forest, but there were fig trees and all kind of fruits and flowers and even chickens and so forth. But you didn't see it as a farm. It wasn't the kind of farm you have big tractors and it plows and so forth. And we walked back to the house, and Guillaume's house, like many here on the island, made out of local stone, local timber, thick walls, embedded in the hillside. It was a part of nature. It was ecologically designed. And so a beautiful home, gracious and so forth, and I'm moving in with Guillaume. I'm not going back. So I'm going to live there forever. But he's kind of rolling his eyes right now. He's not happy with this, but he'll get used to it, and we'll. But anyway, the lessons of design. So design placemaking is very different. So if there is going to be applied hope, competently done, based on Satish's wonderful phrase of radical love, then we have to know how to do it. Hope applied is an art and a science. It isn't just the will to be loving. It is also now an exercise in action. So design means how do you take something that we want to do and we do it in the world? But ecological design is very different. Ecological design is about how we take all of those things that we do and provision ourselves or make our food, our energy, our clean water, our shelter, our transportation, entertainment, healthcare, all of these things that humans do here, and make those things work within the way nature works over here as a system. So what we do in design, applied love and so forth, is to understand what we do in the world, what's necessary for us to live well in the world, and how that works with the way the world works, the way nature works. So we have to be students of ourselves and what we want in the world, and as Gandhi said, there's a big difference between what we want and what we need. And the world can give us all of our needs, but our wants are something else. And so we live in a world, and yesterday talking about advertisements and Edward Bernays. Do you remember that name? Study Edward Bernays, because your students and all of us are kind of his disciples without even knowing his name. But Bernays thought our wants ought to be infinite. Economists typically believe that our wants ought to be infinite, no limit. And so we live in a world which we've assumed has no limits, but it does have limits. And so Gandhi said, there's enough in the world for everybody's needs, but not for everybody's wants. So to calibrate, to study the way humans work, we've got to be students of ourselves. And Carlos' talk earlier this morning, a wonderful talk, was about studying ourselves and understanding what drives us. But then we have to be students of nature also. Nature, how does nature work? It's complicated because we can never know all about how nature works. Yesterday in a conversation here in the courtyard, somebody a local farmer said that, if you take a matchbox of soil, there are probably 5,000 species in a little tiny matchbox of dirt. And we don't know how they work. We don't know their individual names and their properties or how they work as an ecosystem. The human gut has literally billions of bacteria in it. And they form their own system, and we don't really understand that. So the point here is that we've got to understand how nature works, how we work, and we're talking about a marriage of the two. And then there's a feedback loop. If we understand how nature works here, then it comes back here. That starts to inform us about what we should do and what we should want and what we really need in the world. So ecological design is very different. It's not about making things. So the design, the previous slide here showed form making. And form making, if you can make it, and if you make it in a more clever kind of way, you can sell more of it. That's form making. Place making, don't mess up somebody else's place. That's the first rule. and then understand what we are as species, how the world works, and then this feedback loop comes back here and says, this is what's possible to do in the world. You can't do more. You can't do more without wrecking it. So ecological design is a very different thing. Look at some design failures here. The first one is huge. To put 1 pound of product on a store shelf, a box of something or something wrapped in plastic, takes about 3,200 pounds upstream. So you go back here to the mines and the wells and the forests and the manufacturing establishments, 3,200 pounds of waste or gases in the atmosphere, 3,200 pounds to put 1 pound of product on a store shelf, 3,200 to 1. And then this 1 pound has a pretty good chance of going to a landfill, being tossed out as waste. Less here than in the States. But virtually everywhere, somewhere between 50% and 90% ends up again as waste in a landfill or a dump. And then this one, the energy-food ratio. And I'm going to come back to this theme because we have to be, if you want to be loving in the world, you have to understand something about how things work. So I'm going to stress that through this talk. So energy and food ratio. How much energy, fossil fuel energy, not solar energy. I'm talking about Guillaume's farm. But how much solar energy or fossil fuel energy does it take to put 1 calorie of food on a plate? Well, in the United States, it's somewhere, depending on the food required. Animal flesh is much more intensive of energy, uses much more energy. But the ratio runs somewhere between 11 calories to 70 calories to put 1 calorie on a plate. Do you follow the logic? Is that clear? So you got this ratio. Now you could do this in a world where fossil fuels were cheap and we could burn them with impunity, with no other side costs. But that world is over. You can't burn fossil fuels cheaply anymore. Climate change, acidifying oceans, all the other costs built into our use of fossil fuels. So design failure. Could we feed the world with organic, sustainable agriculture? I think the answer is yes. I don't know what it would be at, say, 10 billion people, but I think the answer there also would be yes. But we know enough now about sustainable and organic and natural systems agriculture to begin to feed the entire world, all 7.2 billion of us and a couple more billion on the way. And then there's this thing, and this is all about, this fits Satish's talk and a good bit of Gandhi. If I took the U.S. defense budget, all the money we spend on weapons and war fighting, it actually is a little bit higher than $14,000 per second. So we spend on fighting wars and on making weapons and so forth about $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 per second. Gandhi had a point a long time ago that if you have weapons, it makes you fearful, it makes you afraid. And the more afraid you are, the more weapons you need, and so forth. And so there's this ironic and paradoxical relationship between weapons and security. I sometimes ask my students, if we give you, let's say, $10,000 a second and give you a couple of minutes or a couple of hours to think through what would make Americans or Europeans or Chinese really secure, so that you had a secure home, your food was secure, you were safe, and you had a job, real security, broad security. How would you do it? And they come up with all kinds of ways to make ourselves secure that start with, as Carlos pointed out, start with the way we think. It's ego. And a good bit of what ails us is simply fear. So design issues. And then this slide just simply depicts food moves in the United States on average 1,500 miles, and that's roughly, say, 1,200 or 1,000 kilometers, from where it's grown to where it's eaten. And this actually is going up more. Electrons or electricity move about 200 miles, oil, natural gas, thousands of miles. We ship them around the world in big tankers and so forth. Materials that flow is global, so you mine aluminum in Australia, you ship Australia to Europe to make it into cans. The cans then are shipped to the United States and filled with Coca-Cola, sugar, water, and caffeine that will kill you. And so you've got this world supply line, and the Coke can in a consumer's hand is there for maybe, 5 minutes, and then tossed out in the trash, maybe recycled, but maybe not. And then ideas, of course, are global, and this of course, is good, because what we're sharing, I'm learning lots from our visit here, you're learning here from a whole variety of speakers and from yourselves and so forth. And so ideas now are going global. That's a good thing. Now, what's design mean? There's nothing new on this slide that you haven't thought about or heard before. But if you love and if you act competently on that love for the world, then you begin to think differently about how we make our presence in the world, how we build houses, how we build schools, how we feed ourselves, how we use materials, and so forth. So here are principles that came from the Hanover World's Fair. Nature is the standard. Now that's tough, because nature as a standard is, I mean, we can learn all kinds of things. Nature, somebody once said, is red in tooth and claw. Well, it means, yeah, there are animals that eat animals, and that's not always pleasant. It's never pleasant for the animal getting eaten. But what do we learn from nature? If nature is the standard, what is it we learn? And then secondly, diversity is a good thing. Diversity culturally is a good thing. Diversity in terms of species is a good thing. Diversity in lots of ways is a good thing. And the reasons are different. On one side, the reason is justice. It's just we have no right to drive other species or other cultures or other things into extinction. On the other side is self-interest. And the self-interest is that we know from the way systems work that diverse systems are more resilient. And resilient is a big word. It just means that given an outside disturbance, a resilient system can recover its core functions quickly. So resilience is now, we built a world that's not very resilient. But diversity is part of resilience. It's also part of justice. And then this third thing, account for all cost. I live in a part of the United States where the cost of an electron, or move it up to kilowatt hour, cost of a kilowatt hour of electricity is about 9 cents, okay? Now, good part of the electricity in Ohio comes from cutting the tops of mountains off to mine coal. And then the spoil is dumped down into the valley. And so it's called mountaintop removal. And it's to get cheap coal. But for the people who live in those valleys, that coal is anything but cheap. That coal is very expensive coal. And for the ecosystem, it's devastation. We've turned about 1.2 million acres of West Virginia into something that looks a whole lot like the moon. It's awful, the destruction. So those costs are never built into that 9 cents a kilowatt hour cost. And neither is climate change or acidifying oceans or all the other costs and the cost of the people who live downwind from coal-fired power plants. So you got this big smokestack and smoke coming out, and you live downstream from that, downwind, and so you're breathing these tiny little particles of combusted materials, waste materials from burning coal, and they have arsenic and mercury and cadmium and so forth in them. It goes deep in your lungs. And so the system works here as long as we don't know the names of its victims. So if I died, if I live downwind, and I died, let's say, 10 years before I otherwise would die, if I could take the utility and its customers to court, if they knew that I was going to die 10 years early, and they could take me, or I could take them to court, what would I ask for 10 years of my life? And the answer is obviously a lot. And so that 9 cents a kilowatt hour is a lie. It doesn't tell the truth about what we consume. And so full cost accounting says if you do something here, you got to pay the costs up here and the costs down there. So full cost accounting, and this is a very different kind of economics. And it starts in the ride over this morning. We were talking about economics, and it's interesting because we take the laws of economics to have begun with a guy named Adam Smith, who was a moral philosopher in Scotland, Glasgow and Edinburgh University. And so Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, big thick book, in 1776. And before that, he had written, or I guess I'll go this way, before that, he had written a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, in which he described how the thing that bonds us together isn't economic necessity, it's sympathy. And then as he died, before he died, he was working on a more radical version of the theory of moral sentiment. So here you have the laws of economics. On either side of it in Adam Smith's life where his writings and thinking about the way sympathy is the thing that bonds us together. It's our togetherness. It's how we work together. It's the thing that makes us happy. It isn't money. It isn't stuff beyond some very minimal level. It's not that. So full cost accounting. Costs ought to include social costs as well. And then you design for whole systems. You don't design for components. And the building I showed you yesterday, the Adam Joseph Lewis Center, was designed and made as a system. And you're optimizing systems. And let me tell you how that works. If you spend more money in the States, we have a lot of snow and it gets cold or very hot. So if you spend more money on what's called the shell of the building, the walls and the roof and the windows, then it means if that costs more, then you can save on the cost of the heating and the ventilation and the air conditioning system. And so if you can design buildings to the German passive house standard, more like a thermos bottle that holds heat into the building, then you can spend less money on furnaces and air conditioning and all the rest. You follow what I'm saying? Design for systems and not the components. If you're optimizing components, you're going to pessimize the whole system. So you design to optimize the whole thing. And the same is true with cities and transportation networks and farms and so forth. And then current sunlight. There's enough sunshine that falls on the earth about every, half hour, I suppose, to reach the equivalent of all the energy that we consume in the course of a year. Enough energy falls from sunlight on the surface of the earth, all over the earth, to match everything that we otherwise do. And that's every year. It's free. The sun doesn't charge. And so that goes on and on. We can power, there's enough sunshine. The problem is, of course, it's diffuse. And the advantage that fossil fuels gave us, it was very compact. You could put a lot of energy into the tank of a car. And you can drive for, maybe 300 or 400 miles on that energy. So sunshine is very diffuse. Guillaume has a solar-powered electric vehicle, and so he's got to come home at night and plug it in. And that's kind of interesting. Last night he forgot to plug it in, so we walked over here this morning. And it's a long way. We had to leave at 2 o'clock this morning to get here. And then eliminate waste. Now this means that it isn't you're recycling waste, it's you eliminate waste. And the rule of thumb here is that there's everything that we throw out, everything that gets thrown out in nature, to go back to nature as a standard, everything thrown out in nature becomes food someplace else in the system. So it's used. Nature doesn't have any waste. Doesn't have any waste at all. It consumes everything that is eliminated as a waste product. So these are the rules. If you want to begin to think about love, how do you love in a world? You've got to do this. And I don't care whether your love is derived from Buddha or Jesus or Moses. It doesn't really matter. Love has a certain biophysical discipline to it. There are certain rules to the competent expression of love. Now, that means all those problems I referred to yesterday, I'm going to read the slide, you can read that. All those problems can be seen as either, oh goodness, we're done for, we're doomed, we're out of it. And humans just go extinct. Or we can see them as what I think they are, as a series of design problems. And so if you begin to think as a designer, take those Hanover principles. What does competent love look like applied to, let's say, greenhouse gases? Well, we know how to run the world on sunshine. That's nothing new. We know how to do that. Security for everyone, that's easy to do. Stop species loss, a little harder, but we know how to do that. Grow food and fiber sustainably, yeah, we do know how to do that. And eliminate waste and pollution, improve efficiencies 10 times over, build sustainable economies and so forth. All of these things we know how to do. It isn't a matter of more research and development, although that sometimes would be nice. Most of the knowledge here is old knowledge. It's old and slow. It's been around a long time. It's embedded in vernacular traditions. It's embedded in new scientific developments, but we know how to make the world very different. And then if you look at the revolution, and this is below the radar screen. This is not what people typically see. Patch Adams just talked about the news. You get the national news or international news, and it's all the mayhem and bloodshed and killing and wars and disasters and so forth going on. And the same is true, he said, with the local papers, and the local papers are full of the same kind of thing. And so, but beneath the radar screen, if you get real quiet, there's a revolution happening. It's happening here in Mallorca. It's happening all over the world. It's happening. You can't go anywhere in the world where there isn't this revolution happening, and it's a design revolution. These are people loving their neighborhoods and their communities and their families and so forth. But sustainable agriculture and forestry, architecture and green building, whole systems engineering, new ways to think about cities, biomimicry, I'll explain that in just a moment. Landscape design, Guillaume's home is a beautiful example of brilliant landscape design, but as we drove around the island, you could see lots of others. Ecological engineering, this is the science, if you remember the picture of the Lewis Center yesterday, there was a greenhouse to one side of what looked like a tropical greenhouse. So when you flush a toilet in our building, the wastewater, all that SHIT goes into what is a tropical greenhouse or wetland, and plants take out the phosphorus and nitrogen, and basically drinking water comes out the other side. So industrial ecology just means that you begin to design ecosystems, or probably industrial systems as ecosystems, where every waste coming out of anything goes as an input someplace else. And then information technology for quick feedback and least cost use, all of these things, and then many, many more. There is a design revolution underway. It draws from ancient traditions. It draws from every culture. It draws from advancements in science and technology. It draws from being smarter about what we do in the world. Biomimicry. This is Janine Benyus on the right-hand side, and her book on the left-hand side of the slide. And biomimicry is the study of how nature makes things. And the rule of thumb for the industrial world, and I don't care whether it was medicine described by Patch Adams or industry, the rule of thumb is if brute force doesn't work, you're not using enough of it. And so if a little bit didn't work, you'd put on more and more and more. And of course, that has been a recipe for disaster. And so the way nature works, for example, spiders take dead flies and sunshine and make spider webs that are pound for pound 5 times stronger than our best carbon steel. They make material in those spider webs that are tougher than Kevlar. Kevlar is what we use for bulletproof vests. And think about it. Spider webs are biodegradable, no fossil fuels, no sulfuric acid, made at or near the body, and no cost, no pollution. So could we be as smart as spiders? This, by the way, is what a spider web, this is a spider web emerging. So these are little webs, little fibers that go into, this is the bottom part of a spider where the webs come out. Could we be that smart? No waste, made at or near the body. Our best ceramics are not anywhere near as good as those made by marine creatures that attach barnacles and so forth and clams that make much more durable materials made out of seawater. No heat, beat, treat, no fossil fuels, no sulfuric acid, biodegradable, useful for many other things. I asked my students in my design class to think like a stork. You can use your mouth and you can use your feet. Design a nest that sits on top of a chimney and doesn't blow off in high wind. You've got 2 days. And think about it. And this is a bug in the Sahara. I've forgotten the name of it now. Well, Namibian fog basking beetle is what it is. And what it does, Sahara has no water. But there is water in the air around it, and it comes out at night with a temperature differential. So what the beetle does is to come out of its hole at night. And this is a beetle going back into its hole, but it's out of its hole at night. And see these little bumps on the shell here? They evolved to catch water. And so what the beetle does at night, it basks in as the fog comes in or the humidity goes up. Little droplets form on its back. And what it does then is to tip up its back into its mouth and take a long drink, and then it goes back down to its hole, and day comes and temperatures go back up to 120 degrees and so forth. At night it comes back out. But this is a water capturing device, kind of clever. And if you're a bug or a beetle living in the Sahara, this is a pretty good way, the only way you're going to survive. This is a termite mound. And termites have been studied a good bit. Many of you have seen this, but imagine building buildings like termite mounds. And what termites figured out, with, as far as we know, no degrees from Oxford or University of Madrid or whatever, or Harvard, they figured out that if you have little holes here in the mounds, air will come up and it will exit. And so they figured out convective air flow long before humans were even around. And no engineers, just kind of a collective intelligence about how to make this. They can draw water up 50 meters below these mounds. They figured out how to get suction in little tubes, and the water comes up into the... So imagine building buildings that heat and cool themselves without mechanical device. Imagine building buildings with no fossil energy necessary. This is the most efficient way to move any fluid and also to move air. So again, the industrial model forces air. Nature seduces air and draws it in, and fluids as well. This is a photograph of a tree, and Satish, help me. This is, what kind of tree is this? Is this banyan? They had the wrong label on it. This is in Bangalore, and Elaine and I are walking around Bangalore, but think of this. Not only is it beautiful, think of designing something that makes shade, provides habitat for animals, provides for soil nutrients and pulling nutrients up deep and underground, cools the area around it, does all of these other things, and also is kind of intelligent. And what we now know about trees is, this isn't just a resource. Economists got it wrong. They would look at this as a natural resource. They look at it and say, well, we'll let it stay there if it increases the real estate value. Or if it's lumber, we'll cut it up and we'll make tables and chairs out of it. But the tree we've discovered, trees now have a kind of intelligence. And this tree is communicating underground with lots of other trees around it. And so we don't know how that works. But trees do this. And they'll move phosphorus and nitrogen and water through the ground, through under. So there are mother trees in the forest, usually larger trees, that allocate resource flows through the system around it. And then you step in the forest, my friend Paul Stamets, who studies mushrooms. Paul says you walk in a forest, and all of a sudden, the mushroom internet lets the forest creatures know you're there. You're walking. Somebody's coming here. And it's going to be a very different footprint if it's somebody like Satish as opposed to somebody with, clodhoppers coming in with a chainsaw. And so, unless Satish comes in with a chainsaw, but that's a different thing. So, that was a kind of a joke, but Satish doesn't have a chainsaw. Anyway, but there's an intelligence here. There is information going underground. These networks, mycorrhizal networks, aren't just about getting nutrients. They're about trading information. So mother tree, so below ground, our eyesight stops right at ground level. But below ground, there's a whole lot of stuff going on. The first internet apparently ever established was done by mushrooms, and they were good at it. They moved information. They moved nutrients. So these trees, what looks like simply a natural resource to an economist, or shade for a real estate developer, and a wonderful playground for kids and people that hang out and love to climb trees, as all of you did as kids. It's actually an intelligent device, but it has no brain. There's no neurological structure. We don't know how it does it. It's simply one of these mysteries of design. This is the periodic table, for the most part. Now, if we did a bioassay of your fatty tissues and blood stream, you probably, if you were a typical American, you'd have 220 or 230 organochlorine compounds in your fatty tissues and bloodstream. You're polluted. Babies, the day they're born, arrive in a state that the U.S. President's Cancer Panel described as pre-polluted. And so babies arrive in this world already loaded up with heavy metals and chemicals and so forth. They don't belong there. And then we wonder why behavioral abnormalities start and diseases begin early. So this is a periodic table, and the industrial world took this, basically, and made all kinds of stuff out of it. We made plastics, and we made laser pointers, and we made all kinds of stuff. But the byproducts, that 3,200 pounds of waste up here, were spewed around the world And they got in our food, our air, our water, and it got eventually, of course, into us. So we took the periodic table and we spewed it around the world. And you can find polar bears in the Arctic that are loaded up with polychlorinated biphenyls. And the nearest source of polychlor PCBs, the nearest source is probably about 5,000 miles away. But they're loaded up with them. They're in the food chain. They're in water. If you eat fish, there are mercury advisories for tuna. Tuna are loaded. At the top of the food chain, they're loaded with heavy metals. That's just the industrial world. Here's how nature does it. That's 96% of all matter is made from 4 things. 96% made from 4 things. Ecological design. So competent love, in the way we make the human presence in the world, the way we supply all these things over here, competent love says, if nature didn't do it this way, we don't do it that way. And so we make things the way nature made things. The Lewis Center yesterday, the building I showed you, I'll show you one more picture of it here. But the Lewis Center, I had students read what are called material safety data sheets. They're attached to about every product. So you get a 55-gallon drum of something. There's a material safety data sheet on that. It explains what's in it, where it came from, and so forth. And they read material safety data sheets. We took virtually all the toxic chemicals out of that building. And so the building it doesn't off-gas anything. The typical theater seat here is known to have 40-some chemicals that are suspected carcinogens, cause cancer, or endocrine disruptors, or mutagenic compounds. 40 chemicals. And we sit in those and we watch movies and so forth. Competent love says, no, you take all these things out. You do it the way nature does it. You make nature out of the things, very simple things, carbon-based and so forth, but you make our things the way nature makes its things. And then here's kind of the rules of thumb for smart design. We create solutions that don't cause other problems, and we're not good at that. We tend to look at a problem like a bullet coming out of a rifle, a single problem, and so we solve that problem, and then we got lots of others. And think of this in what was said yesterday with Patch Adams and Satish. Patch was describing a systems view of healthcare. And so if I go to the doctor and I got pain here or something like that, and industrial medicine, like industrial production, will say, well, here, take a pill. But the pill then causes 5 other problems. It causes reaction because the body is a system. And that's what he was trying to say yesterday. It's emotional, it's spiritual, has all these other components to it. But the body is a system. And you solve one problem, you create others. So good design, the rule of competent love says you don't solve one problem by causing 5 others. And then you cause pattern. You solve for pattern. Again, the systems concept. It's got to be technically feasible. We have to know how to do these things. And there is a good bit of knowledge around that we don't tap. We say we have to go to experts. And Ivan Illich, the great friend of Satish's, who wrote a book called Medical Nemesis 30 years ago or so, was saying the same thing. But again, you'd see the world as systems and so forth. And he was describing in that book how a good bit of the knowledge that we need is already embedded all around us. Native Americans in my country had a saying that if you had a need, particularly an ailment, a pain, or a health problem, the solution was probably within a circle of maybe 10 feet of you. It was herbs, it was grasses, it was animals, but there was a solution right close by, but you had to be able to recognize it. You had to be able to see it. And then this is a tough one. Our solutions have to now be competitive by taking carbon out of the atmosphere. We're in a race against time, and time is really short. So we've got maybe a window of a few years, maybe at most a couple of decades, but we've got to eliminate a good bit of the carbon, and our country is among the worst, the very worst. And so we've got to go from 22 tons of carbon per person per year down here to 2. 22 to 2. And we don't have a lot of time to do that. So instead of judging things by the old economic standards, how much does this cost? No. It's how much carbon is saved or emitted becomes the metric or the yardstick. And then it's got to be deployed quickly. We don't have time. It's got to be resilient, redundant, repairable. These are the hallmarks of competent love. So if you make it, you've got to be able to repair it. It's got to fit comfortably within a larger system and culture and ecology. It's got to be doable, feasible, and so forth. Are there any questions on this slide? Hey, one of the great things about PowerPoint is you can put things up people can't even read. I mean, it's like an eye exam. Cover your left eye and look up there. Can you see this? All right, this is the most famous energy graphic I think ever done. This is zero cost. This is the cost metric right here. So this means cost nothing. Each of these slices is a different technology. Okay? So every one of those bars is a different kind of technology. So light bulbs, think of going from an incandescent light bulb like that one over there, an incandescent light bulb at 100 watts, to a compact fluorescent, same light, better quality at 17 watts, to LED at 4 watts. So you go from 100 to 4, better light, longer lived, better economics, lower life cycle cost, and that's the change. So that's the kind of thing. So if one of the bars here is better lighting, variable speed motors, and so forth. Now, the point of this is this. This area, if you take the square inches here or whatever, equals this area here. So this equals that. So put an equals mark here. Okay, you with me? The top of this is about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So the fact that this area equals this area translates in English or in Spanish to saying that we could eliminate about half of our energy consumption, half of what we use, at no net cost. Competent love. If we love and we're competent, we have to understand charts like this. You have to understand the Keeling curve and things like this. How do we work in the world? And so this is just one way to say that energy efficiency is the fastest, cheapest, easiest, smartest thing to do. Is everybody with me? Do you want me to explain any more about this? You're tired looking at it? Hey, listen, this is the most famous energy graphic around, and this is from 2007. You could update this now. These bars now come down here kind of like this and come over here to this. So what was maybe 40 or 50% is now 60 or 70%. That's just to say that more than half of the energy that we use is totally wasted. Loving people don't waste fossil energy. And if they can, they get off it. So competent love. And you've got to teach students this. There's a way to think about these things that gets us better. This is refrigeration. If you bought a refrigerator in the States, 20 years ago, you bought a device that used about 1,750 kilowatt hours per year. Just think 1750. State of the art now is, give or take, 250, 300. You can buy machines that refrigerate better, cheaper. You can get down to 200. Or you can do things like pasteurized milk and so forth at higher temperatures where you don't need refrigeration. But you follow what I'm saying? There has been a revolution in the way we think about energy consumption. Competent love says, hey, look, if I don't need to use it, I won't use it. But here technology is able, in both of these cases, energy all the way across the board has gotten cheaper and better, more renewable energy. We can power a very good civilization with a whole lot less energy, and we could make the transition to solar energy. That is technically possible. That's not a technical problem. It isn't an economic problem. It is a political problem. What's success look like? All right, let me flip over here. This is Chattanooga, Tennessee. And in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the first time Elaine and I used to drive through the city, it was awful. The air was dirty, and people were unemployed. You didn't linger long in downtown Chattanooga if you cared about your life and your health. And so I got a call from a friend, a guy who became a very good friend, David Crockett. In American history, there's an historical figure called Davy Crockett, who fought, died at the Alamo, I guess fought and died at the Alamo and so forth, but he was in U.S. Congress. Well, David Crockett, his great-great-great-grandson, called and said he was from Chattanooga. He had a southern drawl, kind of like Patch Adams imitating Hank Williams yesterday. He said, David Orr, this is David Crockett. And I said, well, hello, David Crockett, I'm the Pope. And He said, no, I'm serious. I'm David Crockett. And I said, well, I'm serious. I'm the Pope. And we finally worked it out. And found, oh, gee, this guy is David Crockett. And he was a city councilman in Chattanooga, Tennessee, this city. And Chattanooga was an old industrial town. Lots of pollution, dirty water, lots of toxics, unemployed people. It was a nightmare. It had the dirtiest air of any city in the United States. It used to compete with Los Angeles for the dirtiest air and usually would win out. So that's what it looked like. This was Chattanooga way back when. This is a picture I took of one of the design charrettes. Crockett got us, a bunch of us, down to Chattanooga. He wanted to change the way the city looked and the way it worked, and wanted to make it clean and green and safe and prosperous. It was like, you got to be kidding. You can't make this city that. So this is in a room right above a discotheque. Does that translate in Spanish? Discotheque? Music, rock and roll music, and lots of noise and people smoking cigarettes. And so we're in the room. We spent 3 days back in the late 1980s with a big map, maps all around here, of things around the city. So we said, could you make a zero discharge industrial place? Factories that don't have any pollution. Well, that's a nutty idea, but let's do it. And so we put it someplace on this map. And could you make this area park? And could you save that bridge? And could you make a walk around the Tennessee River, which is a very big river. It's as wide as this building, or wider. Could you put people back down in the city? Could you build housing for poor people and so forth? And the answer, yeah, we could do these things. So 2 o'clock in the morning, smoke coming up from the floor, rock and roll music still going on down below, and the room was just bathed in intelligence. Ideas were flowing. Chattanooga now looks like this. So you can't see it on this picture, but right here is an old bridge we saved as a walkway. There is a walkway that comes all around the Tennessee River. This was an old industrial zone loaded with chemicals. This was toxic, unbelievable. You didn't want to walk there. Your shoes would crumble, literally, with the acids and so forth in the ground. This was all cleaned up. This is a shopping mall over here, beautiful, and housing along here. This is all parkland here. And the downtown is hospitable to people. People move back down into the downtown. The Tennessee Aquarium is right here, so education goes on here. Hotels and housing here. The downtown was saved. Is it perfect? No. But it is a lot better than what it was. Success story. We can change the world. This is a friend who has been here, Wes Jackson, and a friend of Satish's and Guillaume's and mine. Wes Jackson is a plant geneticist, and years ago began to think about, agriculture is, he says, the original sin. Began to plow up land. It was a sin. Should never have done it that way. So began to think about how nature farms. And this is what is called uncut prairie. So these are grasses that have never been plowed, and their roots go down 25 or 30 feet. These are roots that would stretch from the top of that arch to the ground here, and even further. And so they're immune to drought, long-lived, and Jackson began to ask a very simple question. If we study nature as the standard, what would agriculture on the Great Plains look like? Well, it would look like a prairie. Well, the problem was that the prevailing assumption was that prairie grasses would either put down their energy into roots or put it into seed. They wouldn't do both. And Jackson began to think about this, and it didn't make sense to him. They could do both. And so he began to breed plants or develop plants that would put out high-yield seeds and also invest in root structure. And he's by and large solved the problem. He's been here to talk, I think, as part of one of the sessions here. But this work is going on all over the world. There are people who are doing the same kind of thing with tree crops. And could we farm without chemicals, without a lot of fuels? And the answer comes back in every one of these cases. This is only one. Yeah, we could. This is a success story. Here's the Lewis Center. We set out in the early 1990s to make a building. We don't get sunny weather. When it was raining out here, that looked like Ohio to me. We don't get a lot of sunny weather, so it's cloudy. But could you build a building powered by sunshine in cloudy Ohio? Could you make it a zero discharge building? Could you eliminate toxic chemicals? So that was our challenge in 1995 and 96 and 97 as we began to design the building. This is our wastewater system. This is one of the 2 photovoltaic arrays in this roof, another one over here, but we did it, success story. So when people say, well, you can't affordably build buildings powered by sunshine, I say, no, you can't. Matter of fact, you can't afford not to. And the cost of photovoltaics has dropped dramatically. If we were doing this building, we could do it for, $1 million more cheaply than we did the first model, measured in what are called constant dollars. But can you build buildings, affordable buildings, powered entirely by efficiency and sunshine? The answer is yes, we know how to do that. What I described yesterday is the effort to take that logic up another step. Could you then do the same thing with cities and towns? Could you make whole cities powered by sunshine? And again, the answer is yes. Applied hope and love and competence with existing technology and design. We know how to make these things. That's not a mystery or hard thing to do anymore. Now, this is a different way to think about success, because I think in this movement, we need to party. And so this is a success story from Amsterdam. This is a human pedal-powered beer mobile that goes around the streets of Amsterdam, and people get on, and you sit here, and you pedal like a bicycle, and this thing goes around the city, and you drink beer and go around the city. What a civilized way to do it. No fossil, it's local beer, local supply chain, but what a civilized thing to do. So success stories, we've got to learn to party. Make your kids, in all your schools, make them have fun and see nature as a celebration. So if we lose that, what's the point of winning the war against extinction? So what do students need to know? Well, there's a famous old book in the States called All I Ever Needed to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten. And the lessons of sustainability are really simple. Play fair, and that applies to people with money and people that come to this island and, buy up important property. Play fair. There are certain rules to the game. Clean up your messes, and that includes carbon. That includes toxic chemicals and acids we dump in the ocean and the garbage we throw out routinely. Share your cookies, the old lesson. If you're a little kid and your mama taught you, share what you have. Share your cookies. It's just a nice thing to do. Don't take things that aren't yours. And when things are dangerous, hold hands, join together. We know all this. I mean, sustainability is not a hard thing to learn. We can make it complicated, we can make it academic, but at heart, it's really a very simple thing. We learned all this stuff a long time ago. Here's another thing. This is called thermodynamics. How many of you understand thermodynamics? Let me see your hands. Let me see. We got 1, 2. Keeling curve yesterday, you're going to repeat after me. I will study the Keeling curve. Didn't hear it. Louder. You can do better than that. One more time. Yeah. Now, I will learn about thermodynamics. That's your homework assignment. Now, the laws of thermodynamics are really, they're very complicated if you're a physicist, but they're and a chemist. But they're very simple. And what they say is that what goes in comes out. And so think of this world of over here. Let me do this in reverse order. Wells, mines, forests, manufacturing establishments, coal mines, oil, and so forth. And then think of the economy here as a big pipeline. So what comes in this pipeline from all those sources comes out over here. It changes form. It comes out as smoke and heat and ashes. But what goes in comes out. And even things like a Stradivarius violin, very valuable things, will eventually end up over here. And it's low entropy here, it's high entropy here. Entropy is just simply a word that is a measure of disorder. So think of this as you take a glass of water and an eyedropper, and you put a drop of ink in the glass of water. So I take a concentrated thing, ink, in the eyedropper, I put it in the water, and it diffuses, so the water changes color. Well, that is entropy. Think of a little kid. If you're a mother and you clean up the little kid's room, you know that the little kid will come back in and mess it up again. If things go from order to disorder. That's law number 1. Okay? Everybody with me? First law of Now, the second law says that it only goes one way. So I take a lump of coal over here, mine it, concentrated fuel, and I burn it, and it goes through this pipeline. It comes out over here as smoke and heat and ashes and work. But I can't go back. I can't take that smoke and ashes and waste heat, I can't go back over here and make that lump of coal again. Everybody with me? Now, what this means is, and this is important stuff, the kids very early on need to understand these kind of things. These are the most basic physical laws that we know. We don't know anything more basic. We know of no exceptions to the laws of thermodynamics, none whatsoever. And some people, David Bohm, that Satish referred to, has got 2 or 3 more suspected laws, but I'll leave those aside. But we know of no exceptions to these laws. This is the world we live in. And most of the physical laws that we know are laws of impossibility. You can't go faster than. You can't make gravity go away. They're laws of things that you cannot do. So thermodynamics is number 1. And kids need to know that from very early age on up. And then if they know thermodynamics, it changes how they see the world. It means that. Again, think of this big pipeline. I've got this big pipe here. And so I can move material through this pipeline in varying kind of ways. I can move a lot of stuff, a high volume of stuff, so I can take a great big pipeline and take a whole lot of stuff out of the earth and run it through the pipeline where it goes ordered matter to disorder. It goes from mines to dumps and atmosphere. I can control the rate of the flow. Things can go through very fast. So built-in obsolescence means I buy a product and, oh, it's outdated, throw it away. My smartphone, oh, gee, it's last year's smartphone, I throw it away. So the rate of the throughput. And then finally, the length of the flow. So I can have, this pipeline can stretch all around the world. I can go to Australia and get aluminum and bring that aluminum up to Europe and then take it over to the United States and fill the cans with Coca-Cola. I can have those kind of pipelines that go all around. So these are our choices. This is what we call the economy. And the choice we have is whether this pipeline is powered by renewable energy or non-renewable energy. Everybody with me? These are the basic thermodynamic choices. Here's another very simple thing. If you're in business, you've got a certain thing you call rate of return on investment, and ROI. If you're working in the physical world, you've got the same thing, but it's an energetic thing. So the point here is it takes energy to get energy. Everybody with me? This will be over real quick, but you got to understand this. These are the basic laws of the physical world. If you care about all the love you've heard about, you've got to understand this. These are the ground rules for the way the world works. And wishing doesn't make it so. Wishing that we lived in a loving world, loving everybody, loved each other, doesn't work unless we understand how the world works and understand the rules of the stage on which we play. And the rules are, first, biophysical. So the energy rate of return simply means the amount of energy it takes to get energy. It's a term that comes out of business. So the first oil wells in the States, you put in 1 unit of energy, but you got out 100 units of energy in the form of oil. That was about as good as it ever got, and that was very concentrated energy. So look what's happened. So this is oil in the 1940s. So this is oil, 100 to 1 ratio, and then coal in the 50s, 80, hydro 10 to 12, and so look at it dropping down here. And so the rate of return means that, yeah, you can power things by sunshine, but then you get much less energy in a small space. The great thing about fossil fuels was it was dense. What's called the power density of fossil fuels is very high. You can put a lot of energy into a gas tank in petrol. So, rate of return. They got to know about ecology. Here's how the world works as a physical system. It's all around us. And we'll never quite understand the way ecosystems work, and that's why we create margins of error. We don't, this is why there's a precautionary principle. There's some things that because we can't know some things. And the fact is we're a lot more ignorant than we are smart, and we're intervening in systems that we do not understand. And so ecology is a precautionary science. And it can be used either to control the world or to try to control the world or to respect and honor the world. Do you follow that? Science can do either one. Science can be part of a sacred process or it can be part of a desacralizing process. And then you saw this slide yesterday, but I put it back in this set because Karl Heinrich Robert is onto something very important. This means that we've got to begin to address these systemic errors. We've got to see the world as a system. And if we don't, love is about wholeness. And so we've got to see the world and ourselves in it as whole. And think about this, the etymology, the English or the derivation of English words from Latin. Whole, wholeness, healthy, holy. They're all related words, but we've got to see the world whole. If we are to love the world, effectively love the world, and love it competently, we've got to see it as a whole system. And then I want to conclude with a couple thoughts. People will say to you and to your students and so forth, if you're building a school or whatever you do, sustainability really is a wonderful thing. I admire your sense of love for humanity and so forth, but we can't afford to do it. So, the point here is, we will pay for sustainability, whether we get it or not. You can pay a little bit now, or you can pay a whole lot in the future. And you can make a long list of the ways we pay: health, security, environment, social security, all of these things, and the list goes on down almost infinitely. But the point is, there's no free lunch here. You'll pay to do it right now at a price you could afford, or you'll pay a whole lot more at a price you can't afford. We can't afford. That's lesson one. Lesson two is optimize systems, not the parts. And stress that again, to see the world whole. Competent lovers see things whole. Whether it was Patch Adams talking about romantic love, or anybody talking about architecture, me talking about buildings and so forth, you've got to see the thing whole. Number three, there aren't many accidents in the world. There are the workings out of the rules of the system. So if we've said, as we have, that economic growth is the most important thing to us, then the other things that happen, if that's the goal, the other things that happen are climate change, ocean acidification, species extinction, people get sick, injustice spreads, wars increase. Those aren't anomalies. Those aren't accidents. That's the working out of the rules of the system. That's the when you buy a product, there's fine print at the bottom. That's the fine print of the Faustian bargain we struck with Francis Bacon and René Descartes and Galileo and Henry Ford and Stephen Jobs. And then this is the way Albert Einstein put it. What's the goal of education at the end? His point was to widen our circles of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. That's the goal. And that is the essence of what we've talked about for 2 days, about love and wholeness. So I'm going to let Martin Luther King have the last word here. This was one of the great state papers, and this was a talk from a speech Martin Luther King gave immediately before he passed away, or a year before he passed away. And this is powerful. There is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is a thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide in the affairs of man doesn't remain at the flooded ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is deaf to every plea and rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residue of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. We can't be too late, but time is really short. Thank you for what you do to be on time. That's all I have to say. Thanks. You want to do Q&A?
Stay, please. Stay here.
All right. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thanks to you. Thank you. You know, Never has there been so much applause for such a long homework assignment. Go ahead, Q&A, questions?
So, do you want some
Questions? Sure.
Yeah.
We've got time for questions or comments, so let's have at it. Yeah.
Hola. Ah, sí.
Hola.
Okay.
That was a short question.
That's it.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Thank you. Okay.
No, bueno. I tried to do it in English. I don't say what it was. Well, thank you very much. And I would like to ask two questions, if it's possible. One is, it's too late? I mean, do we still have time? And two, the conflict between short-term and long-term. Many people that is money-making, the power and it's only care about money, so don't care about human beings and nature and stuff. How can we deal with it? What we can do? Or, I mean, they have so much power. And I don't know. I think they are insane. I mean, they are only thinking about money and greed and what can we do? Thank you.
If I said it's too late, then we can just adjourn and go to the nearest bar. I think there's time. Donella Meadows, the great systems thinker, one of the authors of Limits to Growth and so forth. Donella Meadows used to take that question and say there is time, but just enough time. And we know of cases, the reason I ended with Martin Luther King's reference to time here, is that we have to do what we do with a sense of urgency. We're the last generation that could possibly save civilization in some form that we could recognize. We're the last. And think of this as going down a highway. So you're going down a highway here, and you've got exit ramps. And in 1976, I worked as a small part of Jimmy Carter's transition team to the White House when he was elected president. And we gave Carter a paper at his request on the biggest issue his administration would face. And that had to do with energy and climate. And that was 1976. The first warning to a US president was given in 1965. And so there were exit ramps all along this highway. And up here is a brick wall or a stone wall. And we're increasing the speed of this vehicle called civilization coming down this highway, and we're missing the exits to safer destinations. So we're down to the last exit or two. We've got to do what we do with a sense of urgency. So when you study the Keeling curve, study climate science, understand these things, and then be able to convey this to your students. But the problem with this is this, and let me be very honest here. Once you announce to your students, and I wouldn't do this for little kids, let them grow up to be, big kids. But once they find out that the world is in jeopardy, you've raised the energy level, and that quickly can go into despair. You have to then give them something to do to make the world better. You have to make them competent lovers of the world and competent custodians of the human prospect. Does that translate okay? So once you've told them about the Keeling curve and climate change, then you have to give them something to do. You've raised the energy level. So as a teacher, I don't want to teach anything that doesn't have a practical application to it. So I had my students work on the Lewis Center. 250 kids work on that, and about 50 every year work on that building. And they've gone on to do all kinds of things. The development company, they work in architecture and design and high-performance building monitoring and solar companies and so forth. That's what I want, to transform the world. So, no, there's no time if we don't understand what's happening. There's no time if we don't really begin to act and move very quickly. The great thing here is that all of you are moving very quickly. You're transforming education. And the ripples are going back through Satish's work and Patch Adams and other people that have been here over the 10 years. But what you're doing here is transforming the way we think about education. That's big. That's huge. Now, the second part of your question was what? I got all excited there and I forgot what you asked. Oh, yes. This is answers to this question get you in trouble. Well, two answers. One is that if you study happiness, I don't know what it's like here. I mean, you're probably much happier here. You've got all this sunshine and water and so forth and great food. But happiness in the United States hit a peak about 1957. The year 1957. So happiness comes up like this, hits kind of, it bounces around a little bit, and it's dipped down a little bit in the last few years. But the amount of stuff we have, this is a curve, keeps on rising. And so we got more stuff, less happiness. Well, that's interesting. And no surprise there, because beyond a very small amount of income, we know that more stuff doesn't make you happy. It's one of those, that's Patch Adams there going, duh. So, but we understand what makes us happy is things like this gathering and friendship. And I was very happy last night over dinner. We had great pizza. And we had great wine. I was incredibly happy. My happiness dipped a little bit this morning. We had to be up at 7 and so forth. I was not happy this morning, but I'm back. But you know what I mean? The stuff that makes us happy is what we do. It's poetry, it's music, it's friendship, it's great meals and so forth. It's not stuff and it's not income. That's one answer. Second answer is the idea that corporations are legal persons is one of the great disservices the United States gave to the world. We didn't invent the corporation. They started in England and elsewhere, East India Company and so forth. I mean, they've been around a while. But the idea is that corporations are legal persons. Now, you and I are persons. So we can be one place at any time, we die, our assets are limited, but a corporation can be all over the world. And they don't die. Their assets just keep looking for the highest rate of return. And if they can get it in fishing, they do it. If they can get it in condominium building in Mallorca, they do it. They're just looking for a rate of return. But to say that they're legal persons protected by the law, the way you and I ought to be protected by law, is terrible. That is wrong. Now, one of the political battles, if we want to be loving, we're going to have to get political. Politics hasn't been much mentioned here. I'm a political scientist by training. But let me tell you, the numbers are. And just, again, I've thrown out a lot of numbers, but these are also really important. The oil companies and the coal companies worldwide have something like 2,750 gigatons of fossil energy ready to burn. 2,750 gigatons of fossil energy, coal, oil, natural gas, ready to burn. They are pledged to burn that. They intend to burn that. But they can only burn safely to keep us below a 2 degrees centigrade warming, which is the scientific consensus. That's the point of no return. That's the point at which we're out to sea, land is long since gone, safety is over. If we cross 2 degrees centigrade warming, we're at 0.9 centigrade. We're almost halfway there. We're committed because of what's still in the pipeline to another roughly half a degree centigrade warming. We're already coming very close to 2 degrees centigrade warming. So we can burn maybe another 570 to 590 gigatons. Everybody with me? What they've got to burn is 2,750. What they can, quote, safely burn is maybe 570 to 590. Roughly 1/5 or 1/4 of their total reserves. Everybody with me now? So, this will be the battle of all the battles you will face. It will not matter one bit how good your garden is, how much love you feel in your heart. If they burn that much more, we are done as civilization. They will burn all that stuff, and will break no law presently in doing that. Everybody with me? They won't break a single law. 2,750, but they can only burn about 1/5 of that. Now that's our cars, that's our power plants, that's our electricity, that's our commercial products and so forth. So somehow this is the political battle of all. We've got to take, when the British ended slavery, they didn't fight a civil war. They bought slaves in the Caribbean. They paid the slave owners. Well, they didn't pay the slaves, they paid the slave owners. And they didn't fight a civil war. In the United States, we fought a civil war. And the effects of that civil war continue to ripple through our politics. That was a long time ago. And we're still not over that war. 600,000 people died in that war, and there's been a whole lot of trouble since. We're getting better in some ways, but it's still not over. So, 2,750 gigawatts, and we've got to basically take about $20 to $25 trillion value off the books. Is everybody with me? I didn't mean to get into bookkeeping and accounting, but here's where we are. And this is to your point. So we've got to figure out how to take $20 to $25 trillion off their reserve books and make a transition to solar and renewable energy. Is everybody with me now? This is the kind of math we need to understand. This is not wonky stuff. This is life and death for us as a civilization. And if we get it wrong, if we can't solve this problem, now this is sheer politics, and our choices are three. We can tell them that we're going to buy that from you. We're going to buy you out. We're going to put up, as a world, we're going to take that oil, underground and coal and so forth, we're going to put that in something we call the global commons over here. You can't burn it, but we'll pay you for it. And we'll pay you at market rate or whatever, but we'll pay you $20 to $25 trillion, and we'll pay for that over, I'm going to go this way, we'll pay for that over 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. So we'll what's called amortize. We will pay for that over a long period of time. Our second choice is simply take it away from them. And so if we get up and we say, look, and we have marches all over the world, and we demonstrate and we force our government to say, just take that oil and coal and put it away, lock it up. It's part of the global commons in the same way that the air, the atmosphere is, and the oceans are, and wildlife and so forth is. And we just take it away from them. Third choice is we make it irrelevant. So Guillaume, we got in a solar-powered car today. We made it over here. We just make it, he doesn't need to buy gas. He's got a solar-powered car. So if the solar revolution speeds up and goes fast enough, then their oil will be useless to them. But this is the political battle. And instead of some amorphous they out there, let's focus on the oil and coal and gas companies. They have a gun poised at our head, and they can legally pull the trigger and break no law. That's the challenge. So all the stuff you tell your kids, little kids, wonderful little kids, and they're bright and they're funny and they love to garden and they're so good, and we teach them about ecology. What climate change is, that the ecology you have taught them is dead ecology. It will not survive climate change. There will be a very different ecosystem here in Mallorca, in the United States, and all over the world. And that ecosystem is starting to change now. Climate change isn't something out in the future. It's already happening. Bigger storms, longer heat waves, spreading drought, rising sea levels, acidifying ocean. It's here, and it's speeding up. And the battle around this is the battle of who controls those oil and coal and gas reserves. So if we really love, and we're competent, you've got to be students of not just ecology and thermodynamics and all that kind of stuff. We have to be competent fighting these kind of political battles. We've got to take that away from them. They have no right, a small number of people, and you could probably fit them in this space. They have no right to burn that and jeopardize civilization. Anyway, thanks for that question. Sorry to go on so long, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thanks. We'll come back to you.
Yeah. Yes, you listen. What do you think about burning urban rubbish and making electricity? ¿Qué opina de la incineración de residuos sólidos urbanos? Incinerators, waste.
You know, I think the best way to think about this is we have to stop burning anything. Eventually, we've got to disinvent fire. And so, burning anything, and if, you know, the idea of, when I had the ecological design principles up here on the screen, that there is no waste. And so rubbish, you know, if we were competent designers, think of the spider again. Spider webs are no waste. Stronger than steel, tougher than Kevlar, made at or near the body, biodegradable, and so forth. No waste at all. So the economy we've got to begin to develop is an economy that does not generate waste. There is a, in the Netherlands, there is an area called Kalundborg, where the waste of various kind of plants goes out into another plant. And so waste heat, waste products, waste materials, and so forth becomes an input someplace else. So the economy we want to build, the productive system we want to build, is going to look like an ecosystem. And it's going to use remember the toxic chemicals up here? The periodic table, 4 things. Take all the chemicals, all that toxic stuff out, all the heavy metals out. We've got to make an economy safe for life. And that means an economy that serves life. That's an economy small e. That's an economy capital E, big economy. But it's an economy that works with the earth. So I'm not for burning anything. I think we figure out how to make things to eliminate all the trash. And there is no such thing in the world as rubbish, not ecologically. And so, anyway, but thanks for asking that question. Hand up over here.
Con esa idea y después dejamos que salga Satish. Voy a decir rápidamente, la tecnología es un problema.
It's happened so fast. On one side, we use solar collectors and new wind machines and so forth. That's good, like that. And Elaine and I flew over here on an airplane, and that was okay. Although a problem for the climate. But we're now inventing things that change radically what it means to be human. So we're very close to developing genetic engineering means to change the next generation, if you're rich enough. I said yesterday we're very close to creating machines that, and maybe already crossed this threshold, that will be smarter than we are. And when they learn to replicate or self-replicate, they'll find us very inconvenient. And the warnings we've had on that, I used one from 1948 from Norbert Wiener that said that when they do evolve that way, we have no good reason to believe that they'll be kindly disposed to us. We got a problem. And these decisions are being made behind closed doors. They're being made by a small number of people. So Monsanto does to genetic engineering and so forth. No permission, totally undemocratic, and mostly in secret. And they control large parts of the world food system, but using technology to do things that we really don't want to do with it. It would never pass muster if it was done openly and democratically, if we knew enough. And so technology is an issue. The other thing you're raising here is the structure of the economy. The monetary system does reflect a larger mindset and a larger system. And the controls on the economy, we were talking about this on the way over. Capitalism, I think, is the only option we have, but we have an option of what kind of capitalism we have. Can't go back to socialism. That didn't work. And both capitalists and socialists worship at the same altar. It is economic growth. I mean, if this was you could make this the church of the economy, and people come in here and worship, bow down to economic growth and so forth and so on. And for what? I mean, we could recognize the flaw in ancient civilizations bowing to, gods like Baal and so forth, but we don't recognize that we're now bowing our religion as economic growth. And for what? Growth has long since passed the point where it helps well-being in my country. It does need to grow in places where poverty is so rampant, the $2 a day kind of economies, but that's a different economy. And so capitalism can work as long as I think the following things happen. One is a tax on transactions. Now, Adam Smith believed, and his descendants, Ricardo and so forth, believed that money would come up to the boundary of a country and stop. Money wouldn't flow from England to France, but now it does. It flows all around the world. And overnight in New York City, when the markets close in New York City, then the spare capital that's left that's, quote, unproductive for a time, several $1 trillion then washes around the earth, shows back up in New York City at 9 o'clock the next morning. But it will look for that extra 1/8 of a point difference. And so it does all kinds of damage. We have no clue what it does. It cuts down forests in Africa and, you know, destroys reefs in Australia and so forth. But that money is mischievous. It's rootless, footloose capital, totally beyond control. So the first thing is a tax on international transactions. The second is to change the legal nature of a corporation. In my country, if you commit crimes 3 times, you go to jail. Petty crimes, steal a loaf of bread, you know, whatever. You go to jail. 3 strikes, you're out, and you go to jail for that. What about the same for corporations? 3 violations of law, and you're disbanded. Why not? They're not really persons. They're just abstractions looking for profit. So they can, we can disband them. It's not a big deal. But they have to obey the law. They have to clean up their messes. They have to play fair. There are certain rules. Number 3, no money should ever be spent in politics. My country is rampant with money being spent in the political arena. That should be an offense. All elections ought to be financed by the national government. Take money out of politics. If you take a penny from a corporation or a wealthy person, you go to jail, or you can't run for office. So, I mean, the rules of this, and then I get down to the smaller level. What about local ownership of business? What about, I live in the state of Ohio, which has more worker-owned corporations than any other state in the United States. And the pattern was set here in Spain, the Mondragon Cooperative. And so worker-owned companies. What about that? And what about setting a limit to what companies can do, their size? So if capitalism is going to work, and it's such a good thing, then let's make it work for everybody. Everybody is part owner in the companies where they work and the companies in their town. Does that make sense? It's not radical. It just simply is, we now need capitalists to step up and defend the system creatively and figure out how you adapt capitalism for life in not just the 21st century, but life in the 22nd, 23rd, 24th centuries. And that's a different kind of, it's still capitalism, you still have the profit motive and incentive, but it's a rooted capitalism. It's rooted in particular places and responsibilities. So I've just given you the reason why I could never run for president of the United States. But thanks for the question.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Thank you. I love you. I love you. Thank you. Take a seat. Take a seat. Bueno. Bé, són les 2, anem immediatament. Bueno, el que volia dir és que en David realment, a part d'aportar molts coneixements, també ens ha portat saviesa i amor. I aquesta és el que necessitam per millorar l'educació. No se trata de canviar-la, se trata de millorar-la. I quan escoltam en David, en Satish, en Patx, ens donem compte que tenim encara molt que aprendre i molt que millorar aquesta educació que tenim actualment, tant a les escoles com a les universitats. No? Havien de fer... Tenim mitja hora de vídeos. Jo sé que la gent que ha fet aquests vídeos ha perdut temps i la veritat és que ara no tenim temps de veure-los. Per tant, estarem amb en Satish el temps que ell necessiti i llavors la gent que se vulgui quedar passarem aquesta mitja hora dels vídeos. De totes formes, vos tenc que dir que estaran, com tota aquesta trobada, estarà aproximadament en 2 setmanes penjat a la web de Poc a Poc i també a la web de la conselleria. Satish Kumar.
I admire the audience of Mallorca. You have great patience listening to hours and hours of talks. Perhaps before I start giving my talk, and I promise you'll be shorter, and perhaps we should stretch. Would you like to stand up and stretch a little? Stretch, 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 stretch. To the left, to the right, stretch up, to the right, to the left, stretch up, go a bit backwards. Stretch. Okay. Please sit down. You are a great audience. You heard this morning 2 talks. What I would call, the first talk was more about the inner landscape. Your talk about ego and non-dualism was about inner landscape. And the second talk David Orr spoke about is, you can call it outer landscape. And the inner landscape and outer landscape are 2 sides of the same coin. We need to, as in my meditation I said, the inner landscape is as vast and deep and broad as the outer landscape. And the great purpose and the meaning of a conference like this is to bring these 2 together and work on the inner landscape and the outer landscape at the same time. We need to transform our inner landscape as much as we need to transform our outer landscape. I'm sorry David said that he's not going to run for the president. Just before he said that, I was saying to his wife, Elaine, that he should run for the president. Anyway, if he was running for the president, he won't have time to come to Mallorca. So I'm glad that you are not running for the president. But we need to transform politics, we need to transform economics, we need to transform education, we need to transform agriculture in such a way that we can bring the outer transformation and the inner transformation together at the same time. And this was the great gift of Martin Luther King. And you saw his quote on David's slide show. Martin Luther King was able to bring the outer landscape of social transformation and political transformation with the inner landscape of love and compassion and spirituality. And in the same way, Mahatma Gandhi was able to do the same thing. He was able to bring inner transformation of his spirituality with outer transformation of liberating India from the colonialism and imperialism of British. And that is the challenge which we face today. And my book, Soil, Soul, Society, and I'm delighted that now the book is translated into Spanish, and you can get copies. I have tried to bring that together, those 2, outer and inner together, in Soil, Soul, and Society. And I put soil first because we are made of soil. Sometimes we think the soil is just lifeless, something there, electrons and protons and atoms and just nothing. But for me, soil has soul. Soil has intelligence. Soil has memory. More than that, soil has compassion. When the Buddha was sitting in meditation. He was holding his left palm below and right palm above, closed eyes, and a disciple came and asked, Lord Buddha, you have been teaching compassion, forgiveness, love, these wonderful teachings. Who is your teacher? Where did you learn forgiveness, love and compassion, and generosity, unconditional generosity? Buddha quite often taught in gestures. Sometimes he will hold a flower in his hands. At this moment, when he was asked this question, who is your teacher? He did not speak words first. He just lifted his right hand and touched the soil. And in Sanskrit, the word is touch the soil posture. Bhumi Sparsh Mudra. The Sanskrit word is Bhumi Sparsh Mudra. Touch the soil posture. And he says, and he was teaching also his son. His son was called Rahul. And he was saying, where do I learn all this? Which is the best book to read? This is why the idea of eco-literacy is wonderful, which David wrote the book. 2,600 years ago, the young son of the Buddha, 18-year-old, he said, tell me, Father, which is the best book to read? What should I read? He gave the first lesson of eco-literacy and said, read the book of nature. And then he gives a long sermon about earth, air, fire, water. And each of these elements have spiritual qualities. And so Buddha said, I learned from the soil, from the earth, from the land. What do you do to the earth? You walk on it. Earth never wants to sit on your head. It always stays under your feet. How more humility, egolessness, or freedom from ego, or transformation from ego you can learn. It never asks you to recognize. It never asks you to make it doctorate or some position or status. The soil never asks you to give it a Nobel Prize. It remains humble, under your feet. You dig it, you plow it, you walk over it. It always remains humble and forgives you. And when you put one seed in the ground, let us say a seed of an apple tree, or maybe my favorite fruit in Mallorca is kaki tree. You put one seed in the ground, into the soil. What does it do? The transformation, the magic, the wonder, the amazing transformation of that one seed with this relationship of the soil and the water and the sunshine. That seed grows into a plant and a tree. Maybe in 3, 5, 6 years, it's a large tree. And a small fruit. And that fruit becomes delightfully colorful. like a painter, painting, art. All art is copy of nature. All great artists just copy mountains and flowers. Van Gogh planting sunflowers. Who is more important, Van Gogh or sunflower? We pay $40 million for Van Gogh's painting of sunflower, and we don't look at the sunflower. If there was no sunflower, there'll be no Van Gogh. So that soil has given us that kaki tree. And it never asks you anything in return. Never asks you. This is the economy of nature, the gift economy. David talked about biomimicry. We don't only can learn the technology of nature, which David beautifully showed, but we can learn the economy of nature. And that tree which soil has given us, from one seed, gives you not 1 year of dividend. Like if you have investment in your bank or in your business, in your company, you get some dividend. Not only 1 year, but that tree will give you kaki fruit, apple fruit, pear fruit, mango fruit, whatever you plant. Not for 1 year, but 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. And not only that fruit will be for you to eat, but each fruit comes with 2 or 3 or 4 extra seeds in it. Do you believe in miracles? Our science and technology and intellectual thinking doesn't believe in miracles. It's the miracle of nature. It's the true magic of nature, of that soil, Mother Earth. And we are what David talked about, what we are doing to it. I'm not so worried about civilization coming to an end. Once Mahatma Gandhi was asked, Mr. Gandhi, what do you think of Western civilization? Mahatma Gandhi said, I think it would be a good idea. A civilization which can produce nuclear weapons. A civilization which can produce technology, producing global warming and climate change. A civilization which can wage wars, First World War, Second World War, Vietnam War, Iraq War, Afghanistan War, Syrian War, Korean War, war after war after war. A civilization which can tolerate millions of our children starving, as Patch Adams said, while there's abundance of food provided by the earth free of charge. And civilization will burn the crops so that the market value of those crops can be maintained. Mahatma Gandhi asked, you call that civilization? It is not civilization. It's a good idea to have civilization. And if this is civilization, I will dance and sing when this civilization comes to an end. But global warming, climate change causes bigger problems, not only for civilization, but for the planet Earth itself. And therefore, we need to come back to the fundamental principle of living in harmony with the soil, with the earth, with nature. Soil represents the entire nature, natural world for me. And nature is the source of life. Soil is source of life. Soil is not a resource. Nature is not a resource. It's a source of life. And living in harmony. Harmony for me is the most beautiful principle of this planet Earth. the sun is in harmony with the soil. Only through that harmony, sun and the soil, that we can have delicious kaki fruit. Sweet, aromatic, delicious, healthy, nutritious. The rain is in harmony with the soil. The earthworms are in harmony with the soil. Harmony is the true and fundamental principle. If we can live in harmony with the earth and with ourselves and with each other. Prince Charles, I mean, I'm not a fan of royal families anywhere, but Prince Charles is an exception. He's a very brave prince, very wise prince, very spiritual prince, and he's in a book called Harmony. And he says the harmony is the true building blocks of our planet Earth. And understanding the knowledge of that harmony, how all the species and all the elements fit together, the knowledge is science. Knowledge of harmony is science. And therefore, what we call science today is not scientific enough because they don't understand the harmony. It's called science, but it's not proper science. A proper science would have knowledge. Ecology is a knowledge of ecosphere. Ecology and economy, these two words come from the same root in Greek word, language. And ecology, like logic, logistics, knowing how everything fits together. And then economy is to manage. And ecos means home. And home is not only your personal home where you have your bathroom and bedroom and kitchen and garden and where you have a family, but Mallorca is your home. Europe is your home. Entire planet home is our home. That's the wisdom of ecology and wisdom of Greek philosophers. Entire planet is our home. And management of that planet home and our Mallorca home and our personal home, management is economy. Nomos, economy. Economy does not mean money. Economy does not mean finance. Economy does not mean investment. These are the very derivative, very reductionist meaning of the word. The true meaning is to management of the entire planet home, of our trees and rivers and animals and plants and soil and earthworms. That's economy. And nowadays, people study in universities economy without studying ecology. How are you going to manage something which you don't know? So ecology and economy must be studied together. So once we understand that, then it will be a true science. Science will tell us how everything works harmoniously. And I actually don't believe the scientific idea of nature red in tooth and claw. Nature is not in red in tooth and claw. Nature is everything. It's our interpretation of nature which is corrupted. And then practice of harmony is religion and spirituality. When you practice it, only knowing is not enough. Knowing is like you go to a doctor and give you a prescription, and you know this is the diagnosis and this is prescription, but you don't take the medicine. Doesn't help you. If I have a little blood problem, my Ayurvedic herbalist says, take some turmeric. So I know that it's good to take turmeric. And he gives me some turmeric, or turmeric I can have in my house. I keep it I don't take it. That doesn't help. Knowledge doesn't help. Science does not help, even if you know harmony, but you don't practice it. So practicing harmony in your life, putting it in your practice, is religion or spirituality. Religion has got a narrow meaning, like Islam and Buddhism and Christianity and Hinduism and Judaism and etc., etc. Those are more institutionalized. I call Christianity has turned into churchianity. Churchianity is not Christianity. Vatican and big churches and big establishment and mosques and temples, establishment, they have become vested interest. But spirituality is free spirit. And that is living in harmony with yourself and with your fellow human beings and with all the creatures upon this earth, large and small. And so that is why I put soil as my spiritual master. This is the trinity of soil, soul, society. I put soil, not only my master, but master of the Buddha. My mother used to say that the soil and nature are greater teachers than the Buddha. And I was always questioning when I was young. I said, there can be nobody greater teacher than the Buddha. And my mother said, but where did he get his enlightenment? While sitting under a tree. Because he was sitting under a tree, observing the tree, but he got enlightenment. And then, once you have your connection with soil, and you have love for the soil, and you have an understanding of the soil, and harmony of the soil, then your soul is fulfilled. Taking care of, like yesterday I said, taking care of yourself is not selfish. Looking after yourself and developing your qualities of compassion, of love, of generosity, of acceptance, of beauty. These are the qualities of soul. And we always need to work on them. People ask me, how do I learn to meditate? I said, how do you learn to play violin? How do you learn to become a carpenter? How do you learn to become an architect? To learn to play a violin or guitar, you have to practice, practice, practice. Not one day. People come to Schumacher College, they have meditation with me for one day, and then say, but I couldn't meditate. I said, how long have you been meditating? Oh, just today. I said, all right, I give you this guitar, please play. And he plays, and he plays quite well. I said, how long have you been playing guitar? Oh, for 10 years. Say, I think after 10 years you have meditated, you will be able to meditate as well and nicely as you are able to play guitar. So that's a practice. Practice of taking care of the soul, taking care of yourself, learning, practicing love. You say, I get angry. How do I learn to stop being angry? I said, just practice not being angry. There's no rocket science about it. In my life, I decided, I am not going to get angry to take care of my soul. I'm not going to get angry. If I get angry, who is harmed? Who is hurt? Not the person with whom I'm angry. It's me who is under stress. It's me who is being harmed. I'm not going to angry. Neither with my wife, nor with my children, nor with my staff, nor with my colleagues, with nobody. Even if I disagree with somebody, I'm not going to be angry. It's a practice. And you can do it. Everybody can do it. As you can learn playing violin or guitar, you can learn to love and not be angry. You can learn to trust. You can learn. So soul is the bridge between the soil and society. And once we have taken care of the soil with love, and once we have taken care of ourselves, the soul qualities, then that love will extend and will make a beautiful human community, free of wars, free of poverty, free of social injustice, freedom from all these inequalities. Because at the moment, we are so small, narrow thinking. Only what matters is my job, getting employment, money. That has become the purpose of education. Why do you teach your children? So they can pass exam and then go to university and pass exam so they can get a job. At Schumacher College, when students finish their year, they often ask me to give them the last talk, farewell talk. I said, I say a few words, but last thing I say is, now you are going out in the world, I ask you one thing. Please don't look for a job. Don't look for employment. Go out and create your own job. Create your own job. Be an eco-entrepreneur. Create something beautiful, creative, coming from your own imagination, from your own heart, from your own creativity. Forget Schumacher College. Forget Rudolf Steiner. Forget Mahatma Gandhi. Forget everybody. Find your own source of energy, your creativity. Create your own job. Employment, being employee of someone. You have no freedom to take any initiative. You have to just do what your company bosses tells you, the CEO tells you. But when you are able to make your own school, to create your own business, be your own architect, we can create that. We can build a beautiful society if we want to. Somebody asked that the corporations are very powerful, and governments are very powerful, and the banks are very powerful. But actually, they are not powerful. They are not powerful. We are thinking that they are powerful. It's an illusion. They are paper tigers. They are not real tigers. When Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, just imagine, and Nelson Mandela, just imagine. Mahatma Gandhi was fighting against the British Raj, under which sun never set. It was so powerful, with armies and police and money and corporations and so on. And what did Gandhi have? Nothing. A loincloth and a spinning wheel. Nothing. Who was more powerful? The British Empire or this loincloth wearing single short Gandhi without teeth? Not very handsome. People have true power. You are powerful beyond your measure. I am powerful beyond my measure. We are powerful. The corporations are powerful, governments are powerful because we cooperate with them. We work for them. We buy their goods. We obey their laws. Mahatma Gandhi said, we will not obey the laws of the British government. We will not cooperate with their military and police and bureaucracy and universities. And if you withdraw your cooperation from the big government and big business, they will fall apart. They stand on our shoulders. And we have forgotten our power, power of the people. public opinion, Nelson Mandela and his anti-apartheid movement. What power did he have? Soul power, power of the soul, power of the truth. Mahatma Gandhi called it satyagraha. So please do not underestimate the power of the people. If they can say, I'm not going to buy inorganic food, I'm not going to buy globalized economy, I'm not going to be ruled by Madrid or Brussels or wherever, London. And they organize together, stand together. This was one of the slides was from kindergarten of together. When there's a crisis, join hands together, hold hands together. If we work together, the people power is great power. So if you want to transform Mallorca, if you are waiting for the administrator and the government to change the law and give you an alternative, organic, sustainable, beautiful future, spiritually enriching future, you will wait forever and ever. Don't wait. Power will not come. Transformation will not come from the top. It will come from you. Each and every one of us have to take responsibility of transformation. Our power is beyond measure. And so, actually, in Mallorca, change is happening. It needs to be speeded up, but it's happening. In the last 10 years, I have seen the changes happening here. David mentioned about pizza last night. The wheat which was grown to make that pizza was local, organic, traditional, old variety, not GM, not hybrid, traditional, organic, strong wheat grown here in Mallorca. All the vegetables grown here in Mallorca. Made with love in a wood-fired oven in Mallorca, not imported from Coca-Cola or from England or America or Madrid or even Barcelona. From here. If you can multiply those pizza ovens, if you can multiply those organic gardens, if you can multiply the school that you have created here, you can have a wonderful, beautiful, sustainable Mallorca. Don't worry about Santander Bank or other World Bank or any big government. Transform, start there. And that power will spread around the world. We are on a journey of liberation. We are on a journey of liberation. Liberation from the yoke of this multinational, centralized, materialistic, consumer culture, civilization. Liberation. Liberation of the human spirit. But that liberation is not going to be given to us by somebody, some benevolent leader. That liberation of the spirit will come from our soul, from our lives, together. Together. We can hold hands together when there's a crisis. That's a kindergarten lesson. So I'm not disappointed, and I'm very, hope is the wonderful word that David has given us. We are active, we are working. You have got more than 200 schools in Mallorca where you have gardens. What a great change in the last 10 years. And now I want every school to have a kitchen where children and teachers can cook together food grown in Mallorca. Soil, remember soil. And make it soulful, and put your soul in it, and make your Mallorcan society a beautiful society, helping each other. The bureaucrats and administrators and bankers and tourism organizers, they will be impressed with your example. Example speaks louder than the words. So you are already on the journey. And I'm with you. And I wish you a great joy in this journey. And we are on a journey. There is no destination. My autobiography, unfortunately, not yet translated into Spanish or Mallorcan or Catalan, but it's called No Destination. We are not looking for a destination. We are looking for a journey. What is the problem at the moment is not that we don't get destination. We are stuck, fixed, rigid in a system. We are not moving. There is no dynamism. There is no movement. The word movement is a very important word. Have you got a movement? If we have movement, transformation will come. And you are already on that journey. So if you stay on that journey, keep walking, keep walking. Rabindranath Tagore, who was the Nobel Prize-winning Indian poet, great master and my mentor, said, if no one comes with you, still keep walking alone. And that poem is in the book, Soul Society. And so with that courage, with that determination, with that hope in your heart, with that energy and strength, and you are very energetic. Every one of us have that great power. Let's move together in this great journey of liberation. Liberation of the soul, liberation of the spirit, and therefore liberation of the soil, and liberation of Mallorca, and liberation of society, and liberation of the world. And we can all play that part. That's all we need to do. We need to walk in this great march of transformation. And if we stay on journey, the earth is on a pilgrimage. It's moving all the time. Why are we stuck in a system? Earth is moving. Let's learn from the earth. Let's move. Create a movement. Thank you very much. Thank you. 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 Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions?
All time? Half past two.
Maybe it's too much.
Maybe
You
one or
decide.
two questions? Maybe one or two questions.
Sí, dos preguntas.
Just to have a little bit of dialogue. One or two questions?
Yes, thank you so much for this motivation. And movements, as the body has a movement itself, it has an infrastructure, a skeletal system, beautiful body systems work together. What do you recommend, or how can these events be coordinated to create this movement? I think we're in the middle of it, and what is the next step?
We are in the middle of? Did you get the question?
I'm asking, what do you think the next step is for the infrastructure for this movement to continue forward?
Yes, yes. First of all, we need a bit of networking. Stay in touch. 1 and 1 becomes 11, as you have seen. And David said 2 and 2 becomes 22. So the first step is to stay in touch. Stay in touch with each other. Find out what other people are doing. There are so many good projects going on in Mallorca. I mean, last 2 days, people have been coming to me and say, I have got this project, I have got that project, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I'm trying to connect with them. So the immediate step is to stay in touch. Know what your fellow citizens of Mallorca are doing. Good things are happening, and lots of good things. Support them. Join them. Buy their lovely bread or lovely vegetables. Or if you're at school, send your children to that school. Or do whatever you can do. Stay in touch. Networking is the first step to build a strong movement. Then create a kind of network where people say, we will give preference to local food, local arts, local crafts, local music, local language, local culture. And that will create a new strength. Because unless you are rooted in your soil, the tree is in the sky, but it has as much roots in the soil. So when you are rooted in your soil, you can create a world movement. The movement of Mahatma Gandhi started with one rooted action in his town of Ahmedabad by disobeying one law of making salt. It's called salt satyagraha. Boycott the law. And when he was arrested, the magistrate said, Mr. Gandhi, do you plead guilty? I mean, people generally say, no, I'm not guilty. But he said, yes, I plead guilty. I have broken your law. Then I have to punish you. Yes, my Lord, give me the highest punishment that you have in your books. I have to send you to jail. Yes, my Lord, I will go to jail like a bride goes to wedding chamber. That's the courage and fearlessness. But one action, small action in one place became a world movement. Martin Luther King, bus boycott. One small action of one woman saying, no, I'm not going to give my seat in this bus. And that one small action became a world movement, and whole America changed and the world changed. And now after 50 years or 45 years, we have a black man in the White House. You could have never dreamt that when Martin Luther King was alive. And so do not undervalue and underestimate the small actions in your ground level, at your grassroots level, in Mallorca. If you do that action, it can become a big, powerful movement. So stay in touch and support your local movements and build on that. Maybe one more question. Anyone? Any other question? Okay, thank you very much. There's a question? One more question, there.
Satish, how to empower ourselves to put together these two levels that you say, the level of change, transforming ourselves, and also be in the way of transforming in movements or in ecological movements or political economy movements.
How to do it?
Well, you explain what we could do, but how we empower this, no?
Empower yourselves. Yeah. How to empower ourselves is a very important question. And yesterday I said about love. The first step of empowerment is to say to yourself, I can be part of the movement. I want to be part of the movement. You have to have that intention, that motivation. But unless you have that intention and then commitment to be part of it, there are so many busy things you can do. Your life is so busy. You have to answer so many emails. You have to do this. You have to do that. You have to meet that person. Time can evaporate. So you need a firm commitment. And then once you have that commitment, then say, how do I start? I start with myself. Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. You have to be the example. First, you make commitment, I want to be part of this movement, and second, you implement your ideals in your life. And then you communicate with other people. So if each and every one of you communicate with 10 other people, and 10 people communicate with 10 other people, and then it's 100. And 100 people communicate, each person 10 with other people, it becomes thousands. So just enlarge the circle of your communication. So make the commitment, bring the intention, and then be the change, practice yourself in your own life, and then communicate and build the network. And that way, that network will become bigger and stronger and more powerful, and that will create a new transformation. That's the process, and you have to be part of it. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way, as Mahatma Gandhi said. There's no way to build a movement. Building the movement is the way. How do you cook? By cooking. How do you love? By loving. How do you go somewhere? By walking. One step after another step. Just start walking. You don't ask me, I'm standing here, how should I walk? You learn to walk by walking. You make walk by walking. Don't worry about success. Don't worry about results. When I started walking 8,000 miles, I had to walk from New Delhi to Moscow, Paris, London, Washington. How am I going to walk without money? How am I going to walk without food and knowing no languages? I stopped worrying. And I started walking. Step by step by step, you build the movement. Step by step, poke a poke is the word, isn't it? Poke a poke. Step by step. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I have something for you. I will give you here.
Okay, right.
Necesito alguien que me traduzca.
I have to have a little
Yes.
translation. Two? Two. Okay.
Tú, sí. Tú le traduces. ¿Eh? Sí, aquí.
Pues translate.
Sí, es going to traduce.
Okay,
No, pero
translate.
él es para también para... Sí, mejor allí. Sí. La traducció del poema que va fer ahir d'en Patx ja... Bueno, Satish, això és una ceramista, és una artista que hi ha aquí a Mallorca, que es nom Maria Antònia, que viu a Son Cervera, que treballa en sa terra, en sa foc, en l'aigua, en l'aire, i que estima molt aquesta terra. I per nosaltres aquest objecte representa l'esperit de Mallorca que tu tant estimes i que nosaltres tant estimam, i en nom de tota la gent de poc a poc, de tots els voluntaris i de tota la comunitat educativa, gràcies.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you, Guillaume. I love ceramics and pottery. And in Devon, we have wonderful ceramicists and potters. And I love their work, and therefore taking something from the soil of Mallorca, made here, is a great gift. Thank you very much. I'm delighted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Ja cada vegada en queden menys, això ja és família, més família. Bueno, no, gràcies per compartir aquests 2 dies. L'any que ve tornarem, sobretot en la vostra energia, en la vostra poder. Nosaltres seguirem intentant ajudar en aquesta educació i ara posarem aquests vídeos, els que pugueu quedeu, però si no podeu, els veureu com us havia dit antes, a poc i també a la pàgina del govern. Fins l'any que ve. Adéu.